I can hear something calling, it's calling me every day. If taking a chance is a crime, then I've got hell to pay. I've been walking the streets in my mind, trying to find a new day. Keep on searching until I will find, until I find a new way. I'm gonna say something, I hope you don't mind. It's time to rearrange. I walk round in circles, I'm going nowhere. It's time to make a change.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Charles Wallace. In today's discussion, we're going to talk about harnessing the power of your subconscious mind to close the gap from where you are to where you want to be. So, without further ado, let's jump into my interview with Corey Butler. Corey, how you doing? Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Charles. It's great to be here. Thanks very much for the invitation.
Oh, no. Pleasure's mine, my friend. Pleasure's mine. I think you're doing some really, really cool stuff and looking forward to having a discussion about it. So, that being said, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Well, my name's Corey Butler. I'm based in the UK at the moment, and essentially I'm a high performance mindset coach. So what that means is I help people to understand how what's going on the inside creates what's happening on the outside. So typically we tend to look at our environment and allow that to impact our thinking, when in reality the true creative process is the opposite way around. We create the idea in the mind, we create the conditions in the mind, and then that manifests outward into the environment. So for me personally, goal achievement is something it's science-based, it's predictable. We can set a goal and we can achieve it if we follow certain processes, and that's what I do. I help people that are interested to understand that process, to integrate certain principles into their thinking, into their habitual perceptions and beliefs, so that they can operate with an elevated mindset that allows them to become far more productive in goal achieving activity.
Corey, you mentioned high achievers. So I'd like to know, how do the subconscious thoughts shape our outcomes? And are there specific strategies we can employ to align them with our conscious goals?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to understand is that we're all running on a subconscious program. And it has to be that way. We won't go into that on this call, we haven't got time, but 96 to 98% of our results, perceptions, and behaviors are subconscious. And so, in effect, and subconscious, if we just think about that word, subconscious, below the level of consciousness, the majority of people are creating the majority of their results without any conscious intervention. So understanding how the subconscious mind works and how it impacts on our perceptual filters, on our emotions, on our habitual behavior and goal achieving activities is critical, because when we take control of that process and we learn how to operate that program consciously and program it with information that's conducive to good results, then we take control of our lives. And it's not just earning more money, creating a more successful business. It's about just taking control of your life, taking control of your emotions, creating an environment that's healthy and happy and productive.
I think about that a lot, and I think about my subconscious, how that is impacting my conscious. And I think that when I see people like you out there, it makes me think about it more, and I think I start to pay a little more attention to it. And I think for me, that's always been the thing, just trying to be more aware of it, so to speak. And I was doing some research on you before this interview, and your website, Thinking into Results. Can you share a transformative moment that occurred when you shifted your thinking pattern?
Well, That's an interesting question, and I think that it's difficult to, like, I don't think people, like, there's two ways that we can shift. First of all, I think we have to understand how paradigms work and how we change them. And the first thing is there's two ways to change a paradigm or a belief or a subconscious habit. And that the first one is through spaced repetition of a new idea, where we constantly read the same thing over again, we think the same thought over again, we speak the same affirmation over again, we perform the same habit over and over again until it becomes ingrained in us. And then the second way that you can shift a paradigm is through an emotional impact, where, for example, 9/11 like was an emotional impact where that happened, and then for the lives of millions of people, there was a belief shift, there was a paradigm shift instantly that could never be, you could never go back to. And typically an emotional impact, not always, but typically it happens through a negative event. So when we start working with shifting subconscious patterns, the reliable, predictable way to go about it, the safe way, is really to go down this road of getting somebody to help you and through constant spaced repetition. So I can't really give you, I don't really want to say I went from this to this and had a massive shift, because it's about, a paradigm is a multitude of habits, of rules, ideas, and values and beliefs that shape our results, perceptions, and behaviors. And as we become aware of this, it's more about, you know, we can only change one habit at a time or two habits at a time. If we try to do more than that, then we become overwhelmed and it generally doesn't work. So a paradigm shift is an ongoing process where through mindfulness, through presence of mind, we become aware of our environment, and we realize that that environment is a reflection of our inner thoughts and processes. And we take one, we pick one habit or one idea that's not serving us based on that reflection, and then we go to work on changing it. So for me personally, since I've been working on myself with this process, I'll pick one habit and then focus solely on that, and everything else. So it's a very much a process driven thing with me rather than an outcome orientated activity. So I can give you an example of how I've created shifts sequentially to lead to bigger shifts in the long term. And we met on LinkedIn. We've been talking to each other on LinkedIn. So we both use social selling. We're both building communities on that platform in order to create a foundation for our businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I pick one. When I started on LinkedIn, I said, okay, like, I need to build the habit of meaningfully connecting with people rather than just sending outreach messages with the intention of booking a sales call or sending a lead magnet or whatever it is. So I focus on creating the habit of doing that, creating the thoughts, feelings, and actions that align with that. And I created a shift in doing that. Once that became habitual and I felt confident and successful in that activity, I choose another habit. I look at my environment, I look at my results, and I say, where do I want to create a shift in my results? And it might be, okay, well, I want this to happen. So then I pick one activity that's going to help me move towards that. I create the thoughts, the feelings, and then take the actions until that becomes a part of my habitual behavior and ultimately a part of my paradigm. And what happens is you don't necessarily see instant results, but what you do get over a period of time is a shift, and you start to feel different, you start to perceive different, and you start to get the results that you've aligned yourself with.
What I like about the way you described that, I like the one habit at a time, because I think we all have a tendency to overwhelm ourselves. And I think in our subconscious minds, things definitely seem more overwhelming and bigger than they sometimes are. So I think that's really sound way of going about it. I also saw something about visualization.
Yeah. Yeah.
For you, how does the principle of visualizing goals in vivid detail contribute to achieving them?
I think visualization is really critical because, I mean, I'm sure you know, and probably a lot of the people watching this podcast are going to know as well, that the mind can't tell the difference between what we picture in our mind through imagination and experience internally, emotionally, and what we're actually experiencing in our environment. So if our behavior, perceptions, and results are a product of habitual thinking, feeling, and acting, then we have to create new neurological pathways, new feelings, new emotions, new images ahead of the event, in order to prepare the mind, in order to create the energy, I guess. I don't know how you'd say it really, to reprogram, to put those ideas into the subconscious mind so that it knows what goal it's aiming for. Because if we can just talk a little bit about how, like, the subconscious mind, it acts as a goal striving mechanism. So it's always working towards something. So people say, well, do you set goals? No, yes, it doesn't matter. Everybody has goals that they're working towards. Just some people set them consciously, and some people are working towards unconscious goals. So the subconscious mind understands images and it understands emotions. And whatever's impressed upon the subconscious mind is expressed in our behaviors, in our perceptions, and ultimately in our results. There's a correlation between what we experience on the outside and what is programmed on the inside. And the power of visualization is that the subconscious mind, when we create an image in our imagination and we let ourselves become emotionally involved with that idea, not only is it healthy for the soul to do that, but it opens the doorway to the subconscious mind, and that information, that idea, that picture, that emotion drops in. And what that then becomes is a goal image for the subconscious mind to work towards. So obviously we've got, like, in neuroscience, we understand, like, the reticular activation system, how we look for certain things. It programs the subconscious mind to look for certain things, to facilitate certain behaviors, and to open certain perceptual doors. And that's what ultimately leads to creating a new result in our lives.
What I love about this podcast is I always learn. Selfishly, I'm always learning. And you said something during that segment that I never even thought about, that our mind really doesn't distinguish between what really is happening and what truly is happening. That's really interesting to me. And do you think just realizing that, though, can it actually help people as far as the visualization and just in general? I think that's a big deal, just having that understanding that your mind truly doesn't distinguish sometimes between what's real and what's perceived.
Yeah, and we all know this instinctively. We can have, you might have an argument with your wife or with your friend or your partner or whoever, and you'll be discussing something, and you'll say, "Where were you? How can you possibly think that? Were we in two different places at the same time? That's so not how it happened." So how we perceive reality is more powerful. We react to how we perceive reality, not how reality actually is. Because if you put 5 people in a room and look at something that's happening, you'll have 5 different accounts of that one event. So reality is it truly is multi-dimensional. It's not about what is actually happening. It's about how we perceive what is happening. And the problem that my goal in my work is to help people to get beyond the conditioning that they've received in their lives. And that is that we're taught to perceive the world through our 5 senses. What we can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, we class as being real, and anything else we class as being fantasy or imagination, whatever. But we've also been gifted with 6 higher intellectual faculties: will, reason, intuition, imagination, memory, and perception. And we're the only creatures on the planet that have these higher faculties, and that's what makes us creative, and that's what separates us from the animal kingdom, is that we have the power of imagination, we have the power to hold an idea, we have the power to draw upon memory, we have the power of perception, which gives us a point of view. We can look at things from different angles. And when we start to understand that we've got these faculties and we start to develop them and use them in a creative way, and to not focus and not rely so much on our five senses and information fed in from the external environment, then we become truly creative and we start to control our environment and we start to create our environment. And that's how we achieve goals through paradigm shifts. It's not a magical process. We're able to, by shifting perception, using these higher faculties, to create conditions that are conducive to success. And then through systematic habitual behavior, creating systematic habitual behavior that's goal orientated, we create the action that produces the reaction that then ultimately results in the outcome.
Yeah, it's some fascinating stuff there. When you work with people, you mentioned something interesting to me there about how it's the outside external factors that are feeding our perceptions, help creating our perceptions.
Yeah.
How much of that with people, though, do you believe, and it's almost reminds me almost like a mental loop here. How much is it of our own perceptions that we perceive as reality we're feeding into ourselves and almost causing ourselves all of this where our minds are ready to just kind of explode? And I think that's why we have a lot of trouble with working on ourselves. How do you start to break down that barrier and help people align their subconscious thoughts with their conscious desires, and how do you help them facilitate progress?
Well, first of all, this isn't for everybody. Some people, it's probably a little bit too radical. But I think to begin with, there has to be a willingness on the part of my clients or the people that I don't just work with clients. I help anybody. I love this stuff. I help anybody that will listen. So there has to be an openness on, let's say, the participant. There has to be an openness on the part of the participant to be willing to make that change. I think that the person has to have reached a certain level of awareness and self-awareness in order to be able to challenge their own thinking. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, we said at the beginning, like the paradigm, like the subconscious program is controlling 96 to 98% of perception, results, behaviors. So we have to understand that we've got to bring the unconscious into the conscious. We have to become aware of what is operating under the surface and how it's affecting us. And for me, the way to do that is we have to accept the principle that life is not happening to us, it's happening for us. We have to accept the principle that we're not a plaything for the environment, that we're the creator of the environment that we live in. And when we come to that acceptance, then I can say to myself, or I can say to you, I can say, Charles, okay, we've got to start now to think from a different point of view. You've got to start to think about looking at your environment and seeing that environment as a reflection of your inner programming. And if you see something that you don't like in that environment, if you're experiencing resistance, that is an indication that there's negative programming in the subconscious mind and probably needs to be addressed. So becoming more aware of correlating external events with internal patterns. But as a caveat to that, when a person accepts that as being the true nature of how things work, what it implies is that we have to take full responsibility for our lives. If the outside is a reflection of the inside, we're no longer at the mercy of other people, because those people are behaving in accordance to something that's happening. They're a reflection of an internal pattern. if our finances aren't where we want them to be, then that's a reflection of an inner pattern. If our business isn't where it wants to be, if our relationships are not where they want to be, and the only way to rectify that is to go inside and do that work.
Yeah, that's a lot to think about. And it's definitely, though, it comes back to, I think, with anything, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. And you start to talk about a little bit when someone starts to go through this shift, I'll call it, how do you help, and what are the parameters, I'll say, of measuring success when you start to implementing some of the methodologies and things that you're talking about here?
Okay. Well, I think the important the important thing to understand is that we're going against logic when we go down this path, when we go like the paradigm, the beliefs, rules, values, ideas, and beliefs that you inherited in your early life that went on to form this subconscious program, this paradigm. One of the things that it's controlling is your logic. So we all operate in a way that seems logical to us. We all behave in a way that seems logical to us, because the reference point that we have at a deeper level validates that logic. But if we want to create change, if we want to go further, if we want to push success further in any given direction, then in the beginning we have to go against that logic, because more of that logic is going to create more of that result. So having a high performance mentor or coach like myself to work with is really critical for a lot of people, because you need to have that second pair of eyes. You need to have somebody who's going to put their foot in your back and push you forward when every part of you is wanting to go backwards, to turn around and run away, to shine some light when you hit a blind spot and give a different perspective, to give that accountability and that support.
Yeah, I can see where someone like yourself is needed, and I think we could all use someone like you in that help. Because Corey, I think a lot of times when people think of training and improvement, I think it's easy to get caught up in, we just relate it to the physical. Even myself, I lost a lot of weight, right? I went through physical training and it was difficult. How, when you work with people, I can almost imagine this being more difficult and sometimes exhausting, this work, to do this work. But I think it's harder because it's not physically lifting something up, picking it up, putting it down. It's in our minds. How do you help keep people focused on that? Because you can't really see the results, and it's not as tangible. How do you help people stay the course?
Well, over the time I've been doing this, what I've come to learn is that I live by the rule of keep it simple. I'm a big fan of the basics. I'm a big fan of doing the simple things and getting really, really good at them. And one of those things is to take things one step at a time. So we want to eliminate overwhelm. So I'll give you an example. I'll use an analogy. Like if I go walking in the dark, if it's the middle of the night, there's no moon, it's completely dark, and I've got to walk 20 miles, and I've got a flashlight in my hand, it's going to illuminate 2 or 3 steps ahead. And that's all I can see. And I take those 2 or 3 steps, and then the flashlight illuminates another 2 or 3 steps. And over the period of maybe 8 hours, I can cover that 20 miles, having never seen more than 2 or 3 steps at a time. So for me, it's very important that we focus on those 1 or 2 steps and really dial that in, build the habit, create the focus, the presence of mind, take control of the thinking, becoming aware of what thoughts are going through our mind when we're performing a certain activity. Because having a high performance mindset, working with the subconscious mind, is all about alignment. It's all about aligning your thoughts on a conscious level. You set a goal on a conscious level with your feelings on a subconscious level, which is being controlled by your belief system and ideas, values. and then your action on a physical level. So typically what people will experience is I'll talk to people and they'll set a goal on a conscious level, and that's positive. And they'll take some action on a physical level, and that's positive. But if the paradigm, if the belief system, if this subconscious program is not aligned with the goal, that's negative. So what we have is this misalignment of energy that's flowing to us. As energy flows to us and through us, and we're directing it and creating a result in our life, an outcome in our life. We go positive, negative, positive, or positive, negative, negative, positive, negative, positive. But ultimately, the goals, the behavior is going to align with the subconscious. So if we go back to the flashlight and we can just take 2 steps, look at those 2 steps, and we say, what thought do I need to have for this step? What feeling do I need to have for this step? What action do I need to take for this step? Can I do that repeatedly until it becomes a habitual way of looking, feeling, and acting for this particular action? When the answer is yes, that's a part of the paradigm. That's become a part of you, and we shine the flashlight for another 2 steps. So it's about daily being really mindful and daily getting on top of this.
Yeah, I love that, couple steps at a time. I think that's something we always have to keep in mind no matter what we do. Well, Corey, I kind of wanted to end with this. I thought this would be an interesting question or way to end this is when you hear the term subconscious, I think we automatically think out of our control, that we have no control. And I think in today's day and age, unfortunately, a lot of people, they do become overwhelmed. They almost feel broken. I mean, truly, in your opinion, can we control our subconscious, or at least I'll say tame it in a way that it works more to our benefit?
I think that I can't answer that question for sure because I don't have access to that knowledge. But from my experience, we can learn to work with it.
Mm.
We can learn to use it to help us to create harmonious outcomes in our goal-orientated activities. And when I say goal-orientated activities, it can be relationships, health, wealth, happiness, abundance, prosperity, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. They can all be goals. We can use it to create harmony and prosperity in our lives in those areas. So whether we can tame it or not, I don't know. A belief is we live in an infinite universe. So how far can we go? We can create an empowering, like for me now, or for you now, I can create an empowering belief that's going to take me to here. But then by default, that then becomes a limiting belief to go to the next level. So it's the stairway to heaven, isn't it? We can continually push ourselves further and further and further.
I really love a couple of things you said there. Working with it, I think that's really poignant. As soon as you said that, I start to think of my inner voice, or I'll say inner voices, the one that's trying to push me forward, the one that's trying to pull me back. And the stairway to heaven concept, I think that's another great way to look at it. Well, Corey, I think this has been fascinating. I'm always interested in trying to learn from someone who is definitely, who I look at as looking and doing things that are outside of what I normally would talk about. But I'll say this, at least for me, when I started following you, you opened up my mind to want to explore this further. And that's what I'm hoping that this episode does for a lot of people, is something they may not have thought about, but it opens their minds. I think that was the goal of today. So, Corey, that being said, how can people get a hold of you? How can they follow you? Anything you have going on you'd like to talk about now?
Well, I'm predominantly focused on LinkedIn, so I'm really enjoying building a community on there. That's where we met. Like I said, I post daily content on that platform. Do a lot of engagement as well. So if anybody wants to learn more about this, you can find me at Corey Butler. It's just LinkedIn /Corey Butler. you can come and follow me. You can reach out to me. We can have a conversation, whatever.
Sounds good. And I'll make sure to have some links here in the show notes. Again, I think these discussions, what you're doing, it's all about conversations and opening up our minds to allow new concepts and thoughts and belief systems to come into play. So I appreciate that, Corey. Personally, I appreciate it because you got me thinking in a different direction, which I think is always positive and always good. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, Charles.
Well, Corey, thanks again. Everybody, thanks for listening. Appreciate your support. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening. And remember, never hibernate on your goals.